Hi guys, we're back, and this time it's going to look a little bit different. Although we are doing replacement behaviors, this workshop's on replacement behaviors, so teaching appropriate behavior. Beth and I, so hi, I'm Tiffany.
And I'm Beth.
You guys are
I know us pretty well by now.
exactly. But we just have to introduce ourselves for parents that may not know us, right? This is the first time that they decide that this is something that is going to be useful for them. So that's what's going to be a little bit different throughout this workshop. It's both for professionals and parents, even though the other workshops can be both for staff and parents and professionals and people working with children who also have autism. But we are doing a workshop that both are for parents as well as staff at Center for Spectrum Services. So you'll hear Beth and I, when we're talking, we may make examples for parents to really understand, oh, this is why we do it. And then we may gear it towards staff who say, oh, that makes sense. I've heard that before. So like I say, I give you a little bit of a disclaimer. This is stuff at those of you who are working at Center for Spectrum Services, even parents who've taken our behavioral management series or have seen behavioral plans go home. This is things that you guys have seen before, heard about, are actually implementing these procedures in the classroom. And some parents are probably implementing these procedures at home. So again, this workshop's on teaching appropriate behavior, and you'll learn about the importance of why we use replacement behavior. So the question is, what is a replacement behavior, right? So what is a replacement behavior? So exactly what it is. It replaces, so a replacement behavior is an appropriate behavior that takes place of an interfering behavior. So again, this is point blank. You cannot have a behavioral plan. I mean, you could, but the whole point of you want to get rid of a behavior that's interfering with the child or student's functioning. So you can't expect the person to stop the behavior without giving them something instead, right, of that behavior. So you hear a lot of us talking about proactive supports, proactive, and that's great. Altering the environment, helping them, understanding the triggers. But here, again, even if we alter the environment and do proactive supports, we're really not teaching them anything. So this whole workshop is the importance of why we replace behaviors with a more appropriate behaviors that we want to see.
Mm-hmm. So replacement behavior can be a new behavior or a behavior that the student already performs, but maybe not in the way that we like them to, or in the situations that we are hoping that they use that behavior. You must identify the function of the interfering behavior so you can choose a replacement behavior of equal or less effort. I know we've talked about functions of behavior so many times and why it's so important that we identify the function of the behavior again. And it's not just because we want to identify it to, again, like Tiffany said, to understand what kind of setting events and triggers will typically trigger a challenging behavior, and as well as how to react to the challenging behavior so we don't continue to reinforce it, right? But the other really big piece to learning the function of the behavior is so that we can understand what we need to replace that challenging behavior with, that is more appropriate and is better for, obviously, for everyone. So we need to make sure that we know the function so that we can have an appropriate replacement behavior in place. And that replacement behavior, like I just mentioned, that's in bold right now, equal or less effort, this behavior needs to be less no more effort than the challenging behavior. And that is really key. So when we start talking about this replacement behavior, one, for example, would be, functional communication, right? So that might be a way, a replacement behavior you might want to use. But you have to make sure that it is easy for the student to perform, so they are more apt to perform it, right? If it's easier to engage in challenging behavior than the replacement behavior, they're still gonna, I think it's, makes sense that they're still gonna go and engage in the challenging behavior because it's easier, right? So we need to make sure that that replacement behavior is at least equal, if not less effort than the challenging behavior.
So these are just some examples of replacement behaviors. So again, we have an interfering. So as Beth was saying, we need to look at the function. And you guys already know the different types of functions, right? You have attention, you have escape, you have sensory, you have tangible. What else, Beth? I said sensory, medical, right? So you have all these functions of behaviors, typically 5 functions of behaviors. And it's really important to look at the interfering, like what is the interfering and what is holding, and what's the function, so we can replace it with more appropriate behavior. So if we have taken the appropriate data, which we'll get into, and we really have identified, right, what you guys have learned in the workshop, what the interfering behavior is. So for example, we have interfering behavior is blurting out answers. So you have a student who's blurting out answers, and you've collected and found out the appropriate, well, the function is attention. So you guys all think about what could, as less effort, what could, instead of blurting out, we want to get rid of that behavior, what can we put into place? Oh, we would like to have them be able to raise their hand. So another student is interrupting your conversation. You also find out that's attention. So you want them to say, excuse me, right? Some of us have taught tapping on the shoulder, looking at and saying, excuse me, making eye contact. So again, we're looking at what replacement behavior would be suitable for that individual. And Beth is right on that last slide. If, let's just say, for example, I just said, a student is banging their head. Boy, I'm really picking the attention ones, and it's attention. We have students, and I'm sure you have children that, have bang their head for attention. So you want them to ask for help, but they're nonverbal. So you can still ask them for the help. Maybe they're going to do a picture exchange for asking for help. Maybe they're going to use their communication device. Maybe again, it is another thing as asking for help, but it's the raising of the hand. But what if a child has poor motor control? Is raising the hand when you constantly have to prompt and it's more effort good for that student? Absolutely not, right? Because I'm guaranteeing you, if it's not appropriate replacement behavior, you're going to have an increase in behaviors, and that behavior is not going to be eliminated. So that's why it's really important. So these are just some examples of replacement behaviors, not limited to, by all means.
And I just want to add too that, with the replacement behavior, it's just really important that we, like Tiffany mentioned, we really individualize it to the student. So we can have these general skills such as asking for help, but it's really important when we get into how we're going to teach that skill that we individualize it to that student. Just like Tiffany said, if asking for help is verbalizing they need help, maybe it's I need help, or maybe it's just help, or maybe it's a picture icon, or maybe it's some kind of sign or even a gesture. But it should be, when you talk about actually teaching these skills, that is individualized to the student and where that student's level is at that point. So here are 8 systematic steps to promote behavior changes in this in your student or your child. So step 1 is identify the problem behavior, right? And when we talk about challenging behaviors, what it looks like, how interfering is it in their life, all those things. So this goes right into those steps. Step 2 is measure the problem behavior. So we talk about data and taking data and how important that is, right? We really need to see where the student is at that point. Is the problem behavior occurring once or twice a day? Is it happening throughout the day? How intense is it? How long is it lasting? All those things are really important, so that when we start putting in our interventions, we can see if the intervention's working, right? Because sometimes when you think about it, if a child is engaging in a behavior, say 100 times a day, and then in a few weeks they're engaging in that behavior 50 times a day, you may not see the change because there's no data, right? You're just saying, oh, they're still doing it a lot. Well, they literally cut that problem behavior in half, right? So it's really important that we measure problem behavior so we really see if there's actually some change based on our intervention. Step 3 is develop a hypothesis as to the purpose of the behavior. Again, this is our, when we talk about determining our functions of behavior, this is just an educated guess. We use what we have available in our, own education to say, okay, this is likely this function of behavior because X, Y, and Z, right? We have the data to support it. We have a documentation to say, hey, this is likely the purpose of the behavior. However, we all know that functions, what the function we think is maybe not the real function, right? Or maybe the function evolves, and maybe it was just because it was due to escape, right? But now we're seeing that it's happening, more so, or even as equal to like attention or tangible functions. So again, the hypothesis of or the purpose of the behavior can change, but it's always important that we develop a hypothesis so that we have a direction when it comes to how we're going to intervene. Step 4 is choosing an appropriate replacement behavior. Again, we talk about functions of behavior, proactive supports, how we're going to alter the environment, how we're going to extinguish the challenging behavior, and we also we can't forget the step is choosing an appropriate replacement behavior. We need to teach them how to engage to get what they want in an appropriate way. Step 5, identify the current stage of learning. Again, we talk about where the student, where the level the student is right now, right? And we need to know where that stage is so we know how to intervene appropriately. And again, it's going to be individualized to the student. Step 6, determine the level of support. Again, just like step 5, we're going to determine where we need to be for the student. And then step 7, track the new behavior. Again, we talk about data again, right? We need to see if we're going to measure the problem behavior at baseline, we need to also track it when we're doing the intervention, again, to basically measure to see if the intervention's working. And guess what? If the intervention's not working, there could be a lot of reasons why it's not working, right? It could be because we got the function wrong. It could be that the intervention, maybe we're not doing it exactly how we're supposed to do it, right? Maybe we need to be retrained, or maybe there's something else in the environment or unique to the child that we need to tweak the behavior plan. And then step 8 is fade assistance, right? So as we start teaching, we need to start fading back all that assistance we're giving, so that, because ultimately what we want to see is the child's going to be able to independently utilize this replacement skill, and it will also generalize to other environments. So it's really important. I know at least for the staff trainings, previous staff trainings we did, we talked about prompting and why we have to be really careful when we use prompts, because we need to make sure that we can fade them out as quickly as we can so they don't get that prompt dependency that we often see when we don't do it in time.
And don't get worried. I know this was a lot of information that Beth just went over. We're gonna, as you can see, these systematic stages or changes are gonna actually, sorry, I'm plugging in my computer. It just said low battery. It's going to be throughout the PowerPoint slides. So we're going to go down and break down each step, maybe in more depth in some and may not, because you've heard it over and over again, just like this first one. Step 1, identify the problem behavior. Since we started this, is exactly what we have to say. What do you see? So you need to define the behavior. So as parents, if I ask you, what do you see? You tell me. He bangs his head on the table with his forehead. He hits his hand with open palm, right on the side of his temple. So again, I want to know, she screeches. What does that look like at a high-pitched volume, right? She throws herself to the floor. I have to walk in and say, and then kicking and flailing, right? And I'm sure we can get into more detail, but that's the whole point, is what do you see? So if Beth and I go into that room, we can see what you're seeing. If somebody else is walking into that room, they can see what you are explaining, right? It's very important too to change one behavior at a time. I know us, we are bound by, certain things that we see, maybe 3 or 4 different chain behaviors on behavioral plans. And we have to then sometimes stop and say, what is the most interfering with this individual, right? As this child, what is the most interfering? Because that's where we want to start. The fact that he won't sit in the seat, yeah, that may be serious for some people, right? But maybe the hitting of the head or not being able to go out into the community is a little bit more serious for some families. So, right? So we have to give or take. So as teachers, you may say, well, sitting in the seat is very important. Oh, okay. Maybe that is for, for some of you. But as parents, you can see their perspective of, is that really a goal? I mean, it is a goal, but is that something that is extremely on my radar of importance right now?
Mhm.
So that's why we have to really look at changing one behavior at a time. And to me, it is what is causing the most interfering with their day-to-day academics, maybe, okay, academics or their life overall. And then begin to ask yourself, what exactly do I want that student or that child to do? I want them to be able to brush their teeth when I tell them to brush their teeth. Okay, there you go. I want them to be able to ask for help instead of throwing themselves on the floor. Okay, there you go. Do you see? So again, we're identifying the problem behavior and we're looking at how we're going to define it, changing one behavior at a time and asking yourself, what do you want them to do then? Right? So there is identifying the problem behavior.
So step 2 is measure the problem behavior. And I know I did already speak pretty, at length at this already, but so to gain valuable information on when, where, and how often a specific behavior occurs, to measure this information to choose an appropriate behavior management strategy, and then to capture even the smallest signs of progress when attempting to change a student's behavior. Again, I had pretty much already gone through this, but again, I know some people, they roll their eyes when we say we need to take data, right? It's just one more job to do. But it's really, there's definitely some importance to taking data, again, for not just for baseline, but for when the interventions put in place, again, so we can measure to see what kind of progress is being made. And then here are, here's an ABC data collection that we typically use. This is just filled out. Again, it's based on, the top left is antecedents. So what specific activity or event happened before the behavior. Again, these are based on challenging behaviors. The behaviors, what specifically did the child do or say? And that's the middle column. And then C is consequences, what happened after or as a result of the behavior. And again, so say the behavior is John screams, right? So the antecedents, teacher says, John, sit down. John screams, and then teacher says no screaming and takes John to timeout, right? And then after the next one, it says John screams again, and you can just basically the antecedent is the same. Teacher says, John, sit down, right? And as you see, John will continue to scream, and the consequences are, they change a little bit, right? But ultimately, I think you can start seeing a pattern of behavior, right? You can start seeing perhaps what the purpose of that screaming is, right? But based on the consequences, right? So John screams, teacher ignores John. John screams louder and kicks chair. Teacher says no kicking. John starts to cry. Teacher walks over to John and says, it's okay. John stops crying. No response from teacher. John screams, teacher says, now you can stay in timeout, right? So I think we can all pretty much take an educated guess at the function's most likely attention, right? When John screams, he gets the attention from his teacher in some way.
Just really quick, this is where people would say, well, I don't know what is happening. There is nothing that's happening when the behavior, I don't know, I don't see anything. This is why we take the data, because then we can look at, oh, it's when I come into the room and I ask him to brush his teeth, that's when the tantrum happens. But if I don't say brush your teeth and just redirect him to the bathroom, right? Just, gradually guide him to the bathroom, he's more likely to brush his teeth. This is where we start to, have these educated guesses and to use our data to come up with an educated guess on what the function is. So now Beth said is attention. Now, a lot of you may have said, well, what if it's escape? What if John, when the teacher says sit down, right? And he screams, he knows that if he screams, he's going to a timeout and he doesn't have to do what's going to the group. Or we can look at, he gets the attention that he wants, so he's more likely to scream. So again, this is where we start to rule out, do we think it's sensory? Do we think it's medical? Do we think, you're right? Well, is he trying to get something? Well, maybe. So again, we want to have a pattern here.
Mhm.
And as parents, as well as educators, sometimes we look at and saying, well, it's been 2 weeks and I really don't see the pattern. And you know what? That's also, it takes time. So it's not going to happen overnight to really truly look at some patterns when we're starting to collect data, but it's really important. And that's just a minimal of, as I'm talking of why it's so important. But
Mhm.
for our purpose is coming up with an appropriate replacement behavior to get rid of a behavior we don't want that's interfering with their functioning.
Right. And, Tiffany had mentioned too, it's an educated guess. And it's also when we talk about, how do we go about intervening if the function appears to be, multiply, there's a multiple purpose to it, right? So if that happens, again, we want to see when does it happen the most, right? We want to find that primary function, right? If we can work on that primary function first, even if if the primary function here is attention, if we work on that first, yes, he still may engage in that behavior because he wants to escape or because there's something else going on, right? But if we work on that first, we should still see the behavior decrease, right? Because if we're finding the one that happens the most often, we should start seeing it. Once we can extinguish that behavior related to that function, we can start working on the other ones as well. So again, I know it's not likely that a function is going to have one function and that's it, right? Unless it's something that you can kind of nip in the bud right away. Typically, they have some kind of history with this behavior working, and they will find that if it works for my attention, maybe it'll also work if I'm trying to escape a task, right? So the functions can definitely evolve, but again, we want to take it one step at a time and try to find the one that's the most happens the most often and is really impacting them the most in their life. And I think that's the best way to go about intervening and finding those replacement skills is based on, the priority of the behavior.
And then we have step 3, develop a hypothesis, which piggybacks off of what Beth is just saying. Determine the purpose of the behavior, right? Does he or she get what they want out of it? Does he or she avoid something? So this goes back to your function. So now that you have all this data that you've collected, we're going to wean out. So as parents, if you don't have, let's just say, well, I don't have the teacher or the psychologist here with me, you could call educator, your special educator, talk to your psychologist, and we can set something into place. Not only will I encourage you to come to our behavioral management series, but also just looking at it saying, hey, you know what, I want to do this for us. I think that I have the time to start. Now is the time to do it. I can collect this data. I can have, talk to someone about analyzing this data and coming up with the proper function. We're hoping. I mean, it only is good as what the data that we collect and how we look at it. And two people can look at it completely different. And it can change its form, as Beth was saying. So I'm hoping that we can come up with the proper function. Some is clear cut, as some is not, because it's multiple served. So again, that is the whole point about developing the proper hypothesis.
So step 4 is choose an appropriate replacement behavior. All right, so to choose an appropriate replacement behavior, observe appropriate behaviors shown by typical children in the same environment. Use the function of the problem behavior to find a more appropriate and expedient behavior with the same function. And then the appropriate behavior may be an alternative behavior or a more appropriate level for the problem behavior. So all these things are really important when you're choosing an appropriate replacement behavior. You really want to make sure that it's appropriate for the child's age, typical for children their age, and their developmental level. And again, we are going to base it on the function and making sure that it is takes at least no more effort than the problem behavior does itself. And I think that's it. Tiffany, do you want to add anything?
No, just exactly what you said, just piggyback off that. And I'm sure we said it numerous of times in the front of our slides in the beginning. So what do you want to see, right? And you're right, is it appropriate? Is it appropriate at their skill level, at their age level?
Mm-hmm.
So is at this moment, if we would love to, I don't know, I just want to say improve verbal communication. And that is a real big struggle. Is that something that we should make a replacement behavior to say increase verbal? Okay, but is there a faster and more effortless way for that individual to communicate their wants and needs? I'm not saying that's not our goal, because that may be some of our goals. But again, we want to look at it of effortless, as Beth said, if not equal. So we could be, and the truth is, right, Beth, if we put something into place that's not in their repertoire at this time, maybe they're too young, maybe it's not age appropriate right now, you're going to have more problem behaviors.
Yep. And I just want to add too, so I know sometimes I get a little bit of pushback for, for instance, a child who's engaging in challenging behaviors due to the escape, right? So something that you put in front of them is unpleasant, right? Whether it's some kind of task or they're in a certain environment, right? And you want, a lot of times, I think a good replacement behavior is either asking for help or asking for a break, right? And the break seems to be, I think, the big hurdle for a lot of staff, because they think, well, they need to do it. They need to perform this task. So if they get a break, then they're escaping it. And to me, that's the whole purpose, right? Is it more appropriate to hit their head on the table, or is it more appropriate for them to ask for a break, right? And when they ask for a break, their break should be honored, right? Because they need to build that connection that if I want to escape something, if I ask for a break, I can get it, right? If you deny them that break, you're going to start this whole thing over again, and they're going to continue to bang their head on the table, because guess what? That has worked for them. So you need to make sure that, you think about, in the grand scheme of things, what do you want to teach them? You want to teach them if they need a break, they should, that they can get a break, right? You want to build that connection between them. And if you want to build on tolerating, unpleasant things, you can work on that as you go. But I think it's important that we really honor those breaks, right? If somebody is seeking attention 24/7 from you, right? They're really attention seeking and they may be engaging in challenging behaviors. We need to give them a more appropriate way to gain attention, right? But ultimately, maybe you can't be, giving them attention 24/7. They need to learn how to tolerate not getting attention, right? But those are skills that maybe you can teach them down the road. But it's going to be important that you really think about, what do I want to teach them? What's a more appropriate way for them to get what they want, right? So if they know that they ask for a break, whatever communication mode they have, their break is honored, they're going to be more likely to ask for a break than they are to engage in the challenging behavior. So again, we need to kind of, I think about the overall picture of it and not just be stuck on, well, they have a task, they need to do it right now.
Right. And exactly what you're saying. And I think this is, and I've made the mistake, guys, as a parent and as a professional, I've made the mistake of, looking at it of not putting fading procedures into place, where you then look at it saying, well, they're taking so many breaks, they're not actually doing the task. Because eventually when we get there, we're going to talk about fading. That's why we're looking at it. Once they feel confident, believe me, and I've seen it happen, I'm sure Beth has too, they're less likely to say, well, I'll do this a little bit more, because you're going to say, I'm going to throw this one out there as an example, but there's so many different avenues you can take. But now you all of a sudden, since Beth brought it up of the break, and now you can say, well, okay, we can take a break, but do this one problem first, and then we can go, right? So there is techniques and procedures that we put into place so they're not always trying to avoid or escape the task, because now they feel confident that their voice is being heard. Wow. Right. And we're also going to put proactive support so they don't want to take a break, because guess what? They see me as so much fun that I'm going to give them things that they like to do versus dreading having to sit in front of a computer.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Is this one mine?
It is yours.
Okay. So identifying the current stage of learning. So we've said this before. Is this in their repertoire? Again, if it's not in the repertoire, what do we need to do to teach it? How can we modify it? Maybe they're not, 100% fluent in sign, but they like to use sign, so we modify the sign. Okay, they have, as Beth said in the beginning, ask for help. Maybe it's using help instead of, can you help me, please? Maybe they're not there, and that's not what you want of the please, the thank you, whatever. That's not something in their repertoire or in the skill set to say, is that really what we were trying to do? Say please and thank you at the end of a sentence. No, my job is to get them to say help, and then this way they'll stop banging their head, right? So we have to look at this, right? Can they demonstrate this skill, and what part of the skill can they demonstrate? Can he or she demonstrate this skill with help? What kind of assistance do they need with this skill? And can they demonstrate this skill anywhere else? So this is where it gets tricky as parents, just really quick, because as parents, we may say, well, they can do it sometimes. Well, okay, they can do it sometimes, but under what conditions? Well, they can do it sometimes under the condition of me doing hand over hand. So if you stop doing hand over hand, do they have the skill set? Or they only do it under, with mom, but not dad. Now I know it's in the skill set, but maybe it's the behavior that's interfering of why they can't do it. And I know Beth talked about this in our last workshop of the difference between, is it their skill set or something interfering with it that makes it look like they don't have the skill, but they really do. So again, this is where we want to look at what is in their repertoire.
Mm-hmm. So stages of learning. So acquisition is learning the selected new skill. Fluency is using the selected skill faster or better, right? So yes, they've learned the skill, right, to some capacity, but are they able to do it accurately and quick, right? So it's really important that we start, not only that the student learns the skill, but we build on that fluency. Because, I know we've heard so many times how important fluency is to really learning a skill and being able to generalize to other environments, is being able to do it really quickly, and again, less effortful than that. Maintenance, using the selected skill routinely. So not only do we want to teach the student the skill, that we want the student to be fluent in that skill, but a month down the road, 6 months down the road, 2 years down the road, is that skill still maintained, right? We want to make sure that we have that maintenance as part of it. And then generalization. We talk about this a lot. So using the selected skill in different places whenever it is needed. And I know in my previous training, I talked about, is it a skill deficit or is it really a motivational concern, right? Is that there's some kind of non-compliance, there's something that is going on, the child is just not interested or motivated to perform the skill. They can do it, they just are choosing not to, right? And I think sometimes what happens is with the generalization is we just assume that it's a compliance issue, because they have been able to perform that skill under certain situations, but they're not in others. And maybe it's not a compliance issue, maybe it's not a motivation, maybe it's because they haven't been able to generalize to other environments. If you are using the same environment every single time to teach the skill and not giving them different examples of where else they can use it, then they will less likely be able to generalize to other environments and to other people. So generalization is huge. And I think it's, again, one of those last stages. We were so happy this child's learned a skill, they're fluent. 6 months from now, They can do it again, but guess what? They still can't generalize. They know how to tie their shoes in your little cubicle, but you go and bring them out to the hallway and their shoes untied and they don't know how to tie their shoes in the hallway, right? They have not built that skill to a part that is, generalizable, right? So they can tie their shoes, but they can't do it in another environment. So generalization is huge. And again, it's part of this whole teaching, is not just teaching in this one little, bubble that we teach in other, we use other people to teach the skill, not just one person. So it shouldn't always just be mom teaching the skill or only the certain staff member teaching the skill. We should really give that student or child a lot of examples about who is helping them learn the skill, as well as the different environments they can use the skill in.
Right. I just want to add some stuff.
Yeah.
You're right. And as parents, you, even as educators, this is where parents hear, where teachers may hear a parent say, well, I'm just so confused. Why doesn't he learn this? Why doesn't he have this skill at home? Or he really can brush his teeth because he doesn't do it here. That's an example of the lack of generalization. And it's not uncommon with kids who have autism, this lack of generalization. And that's why Beth made a good point, is that should be embedded into the program. Although you think of it as Beth said it, as the last piece of generalization. Oh, he has a skill. It should be worked on. This new skill should be worked on with different people, different places, different examples, as Beth is saying, throughout this whole learning stage. Is why? Because of that whole piece. And that's great that he can do it with dad, but we want him to be able to do it with everybody else as well, because that's important, right? To gain more independence. Eventually, I want them to do it by themselves. So as parents, I'm sure as educators, we see acquisition, fluency, maintenance, generalization over and over again. So when you get to this slide, you're like, okay, I know this is what I do. But as parents, you're thinking, what acquisition? It is teaching the new skill, right? Selecting the skill that you're going to teach, making it quicker and faster, so it becomes in their repertoire, bringing it out again to say, do they really have it? Is there maintenance to it, right? Without me having to prompt it. And then say, in this whole idea, now, even though I brought it last, it should be embedded into your learning stages of, let's help grandma get them to do it. Let's see brothers in a situation, not just in their bedroom, they're going to clean up their toys, right? It's going to be in different places. Now, again, selective places. You're not going to go into this unless you want them to, but you're not going to go in the kitchen sink to brush your teeth. Is that really a generalization skill? Because that might be teaching them something that will have to break in the long run. So again, we're not going to brush their teeth in the hallway to see if generalization happens, because it's just not something that occurs in the natural environment that way. But again, under different behaviors, under different conditions and of settings. And then you look at multiple examples.
And another thing too is, with generalization is, like, I've heard, oh, well, they'll only use my bathroom when they have to use the bathroom. They only use the bathroom at home. They won't use any other bathroom. Now, maybe it's, part of, your child's ritualistic behavior, right? That they only do certain things in certain situations or certain environments. However, it could also be generalization. Maybe they have never learned to use the bathroom outside of their home, right? So, when you go to grandma's house, use grandma's bathroom. When you go to school, make sure that the teachers are in the same line that you are, so that they are starting to be in a different environment and be able to perform that skill wherever they are. So just another idea, because I definitely heard that's, that
problem
before, where they only do certain things in certain things, and I just assume that it's because it's part of their ritualistic tendency, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's because they haven't learned how to generalize.
Right. And that brings a great point, Beth, because then you have problem behaviors. If now let's say it occurs that they can't use the same bathroom because it's out of order, right? Something happened, there was a clog at home, and so you had to go downstairs. Now you have a slew of, they've never been downstairs to use the bathroom. So again, it's not that the fact that they don't have the skill, is that they were never taught of it's okay to use the bathroom for as Beth said, it could be the ritualistic or the familiarity of what what they're used to. So now we have to look at determining the level of support. And again, determining the level of support, we're going to look at what types of supports do they need. Do they need, help? At what levels we're going to get into prompting levels, right? What level of support do they need? Do they need to do hand over hand, which because they don't, they only have part of the skill. So which level of help do they actually need? And then do they need encouragement? Well, I can honestly tell you, I need lots of encouragement. So that's a given. What type of reinforcement is Beth is going to go into? What type of reinforcement? When do we use the reinforcement? Why do we want to increase that reinforcement? And I know you guys are getting so sick of us talking about reinforcement. Well, guess what? You guys know as much as I know, as I love reinforcement. I love to be told when I'm doing something right. I love to have somebody give me, when I'm least expected, a note on my desk or, a high five, because I want to be encouraged to keep doing that. Now, if I was being taught something new, I want to increase that reinforcement. I want to hear someone say I'm doing it right. And what? Maybe I need help. Maybe I need someone to come over and help me hand over hand typing something. And then at the last minute, they'll say, okay, you finish it up. Oh, great job. See? And then here's my great job finishing that typing letter, right? And then giving me my reinforcement. And then you have to ask yourself do they do it correctly? And this is where Beth is also going to go into it, is we don't want to teach them the incorrect way. So if we keep on noticing that they keep making the same mistake, we're going to have a situation on our hands and we have to unteach something because now they've learned it the wrong way. So it goes back to knowing the importance of their skill level. So now we understand the support level that we need to put in place so these other problems don't come about.
So here are some types of support that you may find really helpful when you are trying to teach a replacement skill. So prompts. And again, for the staff, we did a prompting training that was pretty in depth. There are going to be some slides here that will look very familiar to you. But prompts are supplementary cues in the presence of the natural cues that elicit a correct response, with the goal being that the natural cue will eventually control the behavior all on its own. Now that's a mouthful, right?
Oh.
Really what the prompt is, it's something added to the environment along with that natural cue. So let's say that we'll go back to the escape example. So the child is presented with an unpleasant task, right? So it's presented to them. That's the natural cue. All right, so the natural cue to ask for a break, right? So they may need an additional cue in the presence of that unpleasant task to elicit a correct response. So the prompt could be a verbal prompt, right? So they're in the presence of the natural cue of that aversive or unpleasant task, and you may just say, do you need a break? Or you may have to point to the break card, right? We're going to talk about prompt hierarchy and what prompt you should use. Again, prompts are going to be unique and individualized to the child and what skill they're at with that particular thing. But just for an example, again, the prompt could be something added to the environment, right? Now, the whole point with the prompt is that we can fade it out. So eventually, if a child sees something unpleasant and they want a break, they're not going to need me to say, do you need a break? Or they're not going to need me to point to the break card for them to hand me the break card, right? So that prompt is going to be used to help teach, but then it's really important that we fade it out as quickly as we can. And I think we're going to get into another slide to really get into fading. So I'll move up from there. The other type of support is errorless teaching and error correction. Okay, so it's a procedure used or procedures used to prevent mistakes from occurring and create opportunities for reinforcement. So really what you want to think about is if the school is brand new to the child, right? The child has not been able to perform this skill yet. You want to go on the errorless teaching point, which is you're going to go really high level of prompt. And the highest level of prompt typically is hand over hand, right? And what you're going to do is you're going to really not allow the child to make a mistake. Really, you're going to really, go really in depth and make sure that the child does not make a mistake. And then you're going to reinforce, right? And then as the child begins to build that skill, you can start slowly fading out those prompts, right? But the whole point is the child's not going to be allowed to make a mistake. Okay. However, if the child has been able to perform that skill, right, or you've lessening up those prompts, right, and the child does make a mistake, right, because you're not going to be all over on top of them at that point, right, then you're going to stop them. And then actually, I think it's in the next slide too. You're going to stop them and you're going to again correct, and then you're going to reinforce. Okay, so that's another step that I think we're going to get into in the next couple slides. And then lastly is reinforcement. So something added or removed from the environment that increases the likelihood that the behavior will happen again. Yes, our favorite word, right? Reinforcement. It's just really important, no matter what, that after the skill has been accomplished, it doesn't matter what level prompting is needed, there is reinforcement. So again, we want to build that connection between the behavior that we want to see and reinforcement.
And this is, before you go on to the next one, Beth, I just want to say this. As parents, this can be overwhelming because you look at it and be like, prompting, oh my God, errorless teaching. It's really exactly what Beth says. What supports do we need to put in place, right, to make sure that we teach correctly? And if you said, and at any point, I know I've said this over and over again, that you're on second guessing yourself. Should I do this? Reach out to your teacher, or reach out to myself, Beth or Cheryl, and to talk about, hey, how should I teach this? What is this, errorless correction or learning? So what Beth just said is, so mistakes don't occur because it's a new skill. And then reinforcement, you guys heard it all the time. You guys are experts on that. Even if I am using prompts, if they're doing it I am going to reinforce this new skill for any attempt. Why? Because I want them to be encouraged, right? And it's not a sign. I get it. And if you make mistake, oh my goodness, I'm over prompting, or there was a mistake there. Don't get yourself nervous. Hey, get back right on it. Don't forget it, because I see a lot of people, what is it? And they can't say, great job saying scissors, right? Or doing something so silly, and then you turn around and be like, well, they didn't say scissors. Well, they can't say it, so I'm done, right? No, we're going to see. We're going to look at it. I know this is a mediocre example. If they can't say scissors, is scissors that important right now when they're banging their head? Probably not, right? But that's the whole idea to look at it, to say, all right, we made mistakes. I've done it. Oh, I've over prompted. I didn't prompt enough. Oh, I missed that. I should have done hand over hand. It's okay. It's okay. Then we'll just stop and look at it and reevaluate it and say, what supports do we really need to focus on here? And do I really need to start increasing that reinforcement, or do I need to start fading it now that they have it? Because we also don't want them to become dependent on the reinforcement. We don't want them to become dependent on your prompts. That's why we'll talk a little bit about fading.
Is this me?
It is you.
Okay, so prompts.
Beth gets 3 slides in a row, I think.
Yay. So for prompts, again, we did go, quite in depth with the staff about prompts and the prompting training. And we're going to get into the hierarchy in just a second. But so most to least prompts when teaching new skills. So it's really important when you are teaching a brand new skill to somebody that you go in, like I had mentioned before, with that errorless teaching, you go into the highest prompt you can, right? We need to teach the skill, right? And then as the student child becomes more comfortable and more able to perform that skill, we're going to start lessening the prompts. Okay. However, if the child has been shown to be able to perform this skill in any environment, or if it's something about, just strengthening existing skills, right? So they kind of have the skill, but maybe not 100%, you're going to want to go least to most. Okay. And again, we're going to go through the hierarchy in just a minute. But it's really important that we don't put any more prompting than we need to when it comes to skills that are already somewhat in their repertoire. So we want to make sure we go least to most, and we may have to go all the way up to most, but it's always good to start least and then go up from there when it's a skill that's already existing. Graduated guidance is when the child can complete some, but not all the steps needed. So I always think of a child riding a bike, right? So a child can get on the bike, they can sit in the seat, they can put their hands where they go, but maybe they can't balance all the way, right? So as a parent, I think visually, you're kind of running or jogging next to them and you're trying to keep them up, and then eventually you let them go, right? And sometimes when you start letting them go, they realize you start teetering a little bit, and then you kind of catch them again, right? So graduated guidance is you're going to move in and out with the skill based on what the child needs to complete it correctly. And then time delay is really just kind of a supplementary thing. So time delay is when you gradually increase time before you prompt. So let's say your prompt is, do you need a break, right? So if a child is, again, we go back to that escape function, the child is presented with an unpleasant task to complete, and then you kind of hold off a little bit. Maybe you hold off a second or two. First time you make, say right away, do you need a break, right? And the second time the task or an unpleasant task is presented to the child, maybe you wait a couple seconds, right? And then if they don't do it independently, then you go in, do you need a break, right? But you want to give them a chance to be able to do it independently when they can, right? So that's where the time delay goes. So let's say you start off and there's, the time delay is 0, right? So you see them, the presenter with the task, you say right away, do you need a break? Second time, it's a 2-second break, right? They get presented with the task and 2 seconds later, and they don't independently say they need a break. Do you need a break, right? You prompt them to say a break. The third time, you may go up to 3 seconds. So you're going to hold off a little bit longer and just hope that they will have learned to ask for a break. And maybe they do, right? But that time delay will hopefully get to a point where the child knows that if I ask for a break, I'm going to get it. And that time delay can kind of break that gap between you jumping in right away based on the prompt. And then visual supports through pictures or schedules. So this can be really important just to have visual supports in place for the child to have these reminders or these schedules, right? So maybe, these visual supports could be the picture of a break card, right? Or maybe just pictures of their schedule so they know that what's coming next. So all these things can be really helpful for the child. And Tiffany, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think you did a fantastic
Oh,
job
well, thank you.
with your examples. I was listening as a parent. I'm like, yes, okay, I can do this. I felt, yeah, right. It's a good example of riding the bike. Now I understand graduated guidance.
Mm-hmm. So this is a prompt hierarchy. So again, the bottom is the most intrusive and the least amount of, independent that the child can be, right? So full physical. So we talk about full physical, that's the hand over hand, right? That's really you physically moving their body to perform the skill. And then you goes up to partial physical. So maybe you're only doing part of hand over hand, or maybe you're letting go, or maybe you're only partially holding them in some way. So you're going to start easing up on the amount of physical prompting that you're doing. 3, the next one up is modeling, right? And I don't know there's an additional slide here about modeling, but it's really important. So the big thing with modeling is it can be a really good learning tool because a lot of people learn best through modeling, right? So if they can see somebody else doing it, particularly a peer, to be honest. So if you have a sister or brother in the house and they can, because I think that kids just gravitate towards kids in general, and they tend to observe other children more so than maybe adults. Typically, I think, but modeling can be really, really helpful. But the child has to have those imitation skills already in their repertoire for them to do it. So if they are not one to typically imitate other things or other people, then this may not work. But if they do have it, this may be a really good prompt to start with. And then visual or a picture, again, we talked about how important visual supports are. And again, we talk about asking for a break, and maybe there's a picture of a break card, right? So maybe instead of modeling or doing partial physical, handing them a card, you're just going to point to the card, or the visual is going to be in their vision. So that can be really helpful as well. The next one up is verbal. Again, these are just the verbal prompts that we would give. So instead of handing them a break card, maybe they're going to ask for a break, or maybe they're going to say break. But your prompt would be, do you need a break? Right. And then above that is gestural. So it's really important, I think, to also think about this, that gestures typically are easier to fade out and are less intrusive, and there's more independence when you use gestural over verbal prompts. And I know we tend to just, through everything, whether you're a parent or you're a staff, is to continually use those verbal prompts, right? So get up, sit in your chair, right? Or, all those things, right? But maybe instead of saying sit in your chair, maybe you just point to the chair, right? That would be less intrusive. And the child is going to be able to show you more independence if you can try to fade out that verbal and go to gestural. Because a lot of times children, what they'll do is we're going to talk, I think we're going to talk about prompt dependency in a little bit. If not, I'll say it real quick here, is that if you get stuck on the same prompt, use the same prompt every single time, that it's going to be part of what they expect in the environment. So we talk about the natural cue. Say if it's the natural cue is, the unpleasant task, right? That's a natural cue. Now, if I'm going in there and saying, do you need a break? And I'm constantly just saying, do you need a break every time? The child's likely going to think that I need to prompt them before they can respond, right? So we have to try to ease out of or fade out those verbal prompts as quickly as we can, because they may feel that is part of the whole connected contingency, right? Is that the parent or the staff have to say, do you need a break before I can ask for a break, right? So we want to break that up and make sure we fade out that verbal prompt as quick as we can. And then right at the top is natural, right? So again, we talk about those natural cues. So again, unpleasant task would be a natural cue to ask for a break, right? A natural cue for, Tiffany, give me another example for a natural cue. Can you think of anything?
Let's see. Natural cue. Wouldn't it be your natural? I guess it go back to reinforcement. I think a natural cue is that annoying seatbelt.
Mm-hmm.
No one has to do it for you, or would that be your? Would you use that under a natural cue?
So another example, I have one now that I'm thinking of it. So a natural cue, say that the function of challenging behavior is a tantrum because they want something, right? They want a particular item. The natural cue could be the sight of the item. So they see the iPad and and instead of throwing a tantrum to get it, they may say, can I have the iPad? Right. So the replacement behavior would be the, functional communication, appropriate functional communication, as opposed to throwing a tantrum. So that natural thing in the environment that would typically trigger them to engage in some behavior, right? So whether it's good or bad behavior, something in the environment is triggering them to do that. So again, with the natural, there is no prompt at all, right? So it's free of prompts when you get to the natural, and that's where we want to be, again, because the natural is the most independent and least intrusive out of all of these. Okay, so we have errorless teaching and error correction. I know I went over it pretty fully in the last few slides, but I'll go over it quickly here. So errorless teaching, highest level of prompting needed to ensure errors don't occur, right? So if a child needs to sign, they need a need for a break, and they have not learned how to sign for break, you are going to go hand over hand, and you're going to teach them the sign for break, right? Once they've signed it, no matter how much level, the highest level, no matter how much prompting is needed, you're going to reinforce, right? So if they are signing for break, even if you have to go hand over hand, they're going to sign for break, and then you're going to reinforce with the break. Okay. The next time you do it, maybe you do it a few more times, hand over hand, and then you start fading that out. And maybe you only go partial. Maybe you're only going to grab their hand, right? And see if they can do it themselves, right? Or maybe you're only going to do part of the sign and they have to finish it, right? So you're going to slowly start fading out those prompts as you go. And then errorless correction. So this happens when typically when the child has a skill, at least to some level, right? And they start performing this skill, but they don't do it correctly, right? So you're going to stop them. You're going to reteach and practice. And then once they have performed that skill, again, no matter how much level of prompting is needed, once they're able to do that skill correctly, you're going to again reinforce.
There could be things going on of why that skill, I mean, they have it, but maybe they missed it. Maybe something was distracting them. But again, Beth made it clear, we don't want them to get, I call it the habit of thinking that, the distraction then leads into the misreading of the skill. And then they think that it's the chain. So again, we want to make sure it becomes errorless.
And again, we're teaching, we want to teach new appropriate skills. So it's important that when we're teaching that we don't forget to reinforce, especially when they're learning a new skill.
This is the last one on reinforcement. So as Beth just said, woo, Beth, as Beth just said, we're praising frequently when we're teaching the new skill. You praise immediately. And even if it's partially, remember I gave the example of this, I know it's juvenile, but the example of the scissors, what is it? They say, and you're like, yeah, scissors. Yes, great job. And you're saying, wait, why didn't they just said scissors? Well, or just the S. I'm going to reinforce because any attempt is better than they want something, right? And better than banging their head. So we want to still have the encouragement. So we're praising immediately when you start to see great success in the skill development. And again, you have to look at it of, are we using token boards? Are you using stickers? What kind of tangibles are you actually giving them? Are you doing a prize exchange? For me, if it was looking at it, knowing the child's skill level, and you've heard me say this in other workshops that I've done, is that can they wait for the reinforcement? Well, if I was doing a new skill, I wouldn't want to wait for my reinforcement. I want to reinforce immediately. So I want to do an exchange prize. But if I was using the token board, because you're asking them to continually do something that is in their repertoire that they're great at, right? Or they're learning at, now they can exchange prize. It would be, they had their 4 tokens, they have their 5 tokens, and then they get their swing or their idea of what reinforcement they are. So again, when you're reading this, I think of it as the old, people look at it of, I bring my tokens at the end of the day and I exchange it for a prize. Like I have a prize box. Don't think of it, I mean, you could think of it that way, but during this time, and Beth, you can piggyback off of this, during this time, we want to reinforce immediately and not wait.
Mm-hmm. And the token system can be really helpful in bridging that gap between a reinforcement that maybe they can't get right away. But again, we talk about how important it is to reinforce immediately after the behavior. That way there's built that connection. Again, that token economy is a good, I think, bridge to basically getting reinforced immediately in some way. and then also delaying that reinforcement.
Absolutely.
I think this is you.
Okay, and then we have step 7 was track the new behavior. Yes, we're back to it. We're back to data collection.
Woohoo!
Woo! Remember, when people hear me say this, even in school, or as you as parents heard me say, we're only going to track one behavior or look at one intervention. Why? Because I need to know what it's working and what is not working. So if we have 5 things going on, that's fantastic that your kid can do 5 different, you learned 5 different things and is doing it, but what is actually maintaining or changing the better, their behavior. So that's the whole point too. So when we're tracking the new behavior, we're practicing the replacement behavior, and we're looking how they move through these stages. Are they becoming familiar with the new behavior? So we talk about fluency, or how we look at it as saying how dependable and reliable it is. We have to look at it as, has it changed the behavior? When I say that, has the unwanted behavior decreased and they have learned this new skill? Why? Why do we want to do this? Because we want to look at it and say, is this working or is it not working? Should I alter, change? What's happening here? Am I hitting on the right thing? Am I adding to it? Because then the next time we look at it, say, wow, their accuracy, their fluency, wow, we're looking at maintenance, the corrected, errorless teaching is happening, I'm fading out prompts, whatever it may be. Now we look at it and say, wow, this is actually improving. So now we can alter and change. If we say nothing has worked at all, then we have to alter and change, because now we realize what is happening right now. Something is interfering, or we're targeting the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
So again, sometimes progress is noticeable and with the casual observations, and sometimes it's not at all. And I hear this, it's not working. Well, number one, as parents and as educators, we have to give it time. Just because we see an increase in the behavior, remember, we're going through teaching, we're teaching them new skill. It's not going to eliminate the old behavior completely. That's why we take track, and we take data to keep track of what is happening. So again, you ask yourself, how do I know what he is improving or when he is improving? That is because we have data to support this instead of going on our hunch, because I hear it all the time. And by the way, sometimes I hear as parents, I'm in this boat. I see a big decline and I say, it's not working. Or I see a big spike. It's definitely working. And then all of a sudden, 2 days later, you go, well, what happened here? So if we have this stuff, we can start analyzing and saying, oh, that's because the teacher wasn't here. And maybe we look at, he was distracted, or he wasn't feeling good, or this is not working at all. Right. So Beth, you want to add anything?
No, I just wanted to add, I might be just repeating what you said, but
that's okay. We like it.
But the reason why we take data really is to see, we want to see a spike, an increase in the replacement behavior, in the fact that they are the student or child is moving in the right direction, like they're getting independence in that skill. And in the same fashion, we want to see that challenging behavior go down, right? Dramatically. Now, like Tiffany said, it may take time, right? But we should start seeing replacement behavior, the independent replacement behavior going up, and the challenging behavior go down. Now, if we don't see that, right, there's could be multiple different reasons why it's not working. Maybe we're not teaching the skill correctly. Maybe we've gotten the replacement behavior wrong, right? Maybe the replacement behavior is is increasing. If they're doing really well at that scale, but their challenging behavior is still the same or increasing or variable. Or maybe we got the replacement behavior wrong. Maybe we got the function wrong, right? There could be a lot of different reasons. Maybe we're not reinforcing enough. I'm going back to reinforcement.
Right.
but maybe we haven't been reinforcing enough, right? So there could be multiple reasons why the intervention is not working. And we would not know that unless we took data, right? We need to take data so we can see the progress and we can start tweaking what the plan is based on what we know and, as we talk as a team. So again, I'm going to talk about reinforcement till I'm blue in the face. And I'm going to talk about data till I'm blue in the face. But why that's so important is this. Okay, so FADE assistance. So this is step 8. So another purpose of tracking the new behavior is to know when to decrease support, right? So again, we talk about when you start seeing that child being able to perform the skill with more independence, we want to really be able to fade out the assistance really systematically, right? And again, we take data, so we know when we start seeing changes with the child and their ability to perform that skill. Students need less help to demonstrate the skill. These are examples of increased independence, and students need less reinforcement to demonstrate the skill. All right, so that's really key too. So we start seeing these changes, which are great. We really need to fade the assistance out again, like I had mentioned before. Prompt dependency is a thing, and the thing is with prompt dependency, it's not the problem with the child; it's a problem with us. We created the prompt dependency. So when we talk about children as like, oh, they're so prompt dependent, right? We did that to them, right? Because we did not fade our prompting soon enough, right? And the same thing with reinforcement. We talk about children like, oh, they won't do the skill unless they are reinforced the same exact way, the same exact time. Well, guess what? We did that. We didn't fade reinforcement enough or soon enough. So all those things are really important when it comes to fading assistance. Because again, the ultimate goal is that they independently can, perform these skills, right? We want to get them as independent as possible. So we need to start fading these assistants out systematically based on data so they can, again, do it independently. And they were going to need less and less reinforcement to do so. Do you want to add anything, Tiffany?
That's exactly right.
Well, thanks.
You're welcome. Oh, there's your new slide, right?
Yeah.
So with fading, we're decreasing the level of supports. So we're looking at, as Beth said, with that hierarchy, with this decrease of level supports, you may go from a visual to rather than verbal, right? You may do minimal guidance and minimal prompts. Why? Because Beth said in the previous slide is we don't want them to become prompt dependent. We want them to be able to do the skill independently with minimal prompts. And then we also, as Beth said it before, so I'm just piggybacking off of her with the fading procedures. I always hear, well, if we give reinforcement, they'll expect the reinforcement. Well, if you don't give reinforcement, then they won't do the skill, because what's motivating them to even complete the task? And then it may become aversive to them. So we have to look at this as, yes, we go into increasing our reinforcement, but when the skill goes back to the break car, right? You're going to honor all those breaks, and then you start to fade out the time of the break. You're going to increase the tasks that they have to do before the break. So when we look at the reinforcement procedure, we're going to say, maybe we're going to increase use the example, the token board. Maybe it was they're getting reinforced every 3. Now they're getting reinforced every 5. Right? Now they're being reinforced every 6 or 7, whatever. You're increasing the time they are going to get reinforced. As I gave you the example of delaying the rewards, the token economy. The slide we talked about before, I don't know, was a couple of them. Remember I said at the end of the day, maybe they have all these tokens and they can wait till the end of the day. Maybe now it becomes the weeks. Right? Becomes the week. So we're fading. And I know a lot of people as providers and as parents, you want them to be able to be naturally motivated to do stuff. And you do have children and you do have students who are naturally motivated to do stuff because they call it the interest, right? It doesn't have a time, it doesn't have an end. There's no behaviors that are engaged in it. Is because they love to do it. They're interested in doing it. That's how you know it's their true interest. So this is on giving them something or reinforcing to give them the new tools that they need, and they need motivation to do it. So again, we're going to, once they have it in the repertoire, as parents and as educators or professionals, what kind of procedure are we going to do to now fade out? Maybe it's going to be spontaneous, right? They don't know when it's coming. And so they're more likely to want to continue to engage in that skill in hopes that they get reinforced. So I didn't know if you want to add anything
No.
else, Beth, into why we start to fade out our prompts and reinforcement.
No, I think that was it. That was good.
Okay.
The summary, yay.
Yeah,
We're
you
here.
guys helped
We're
out. And I do want to piggyback after Beth. Is this your slide after you go? I just wanted to, woo, you guys are hanging in there. One more.
So this is the summary. So determining and teaching a replacement behavior is a critical part of any intervention plan. The replacement behavior you teach should serve the same function as the interfering behavior. The replacement behavior should also be as effective as the interfering behavior. And again, what you talk about being effective, not only effective, but less effort, if anything, at least equal to the amount of effort for the interfering behavior. And we must teach the new skill frequently throughout the student's school day. So again, a new skill we're going to have to teach frequently, not just once a day or once a week. This should be taught throughout the whole day. And we also need to reinforce heavily with a new skill. And like Tiffany had mentioned in the previous slide, as the skill becomes more, the student is able to perform the skill more frequently and consistently, then we start fading out those reinforcements and those prompts.
Before we end, I know this is a lot for parents as well as staff. You are used to seeing and this is just a reference, but as parents, just to end it is, look at it from going through the whole steps is look at saying, what do I want to work on at home? What one behavior is interfering? And work with us. And if you need assistance on, what's the function? How do I collect data effectively? Ask out, do they have this skill level? So once I find the behavior I want to look at, I have, found out the function. I now look at the appropriate replacement behavior because what do I want to change and what do I want to replace it with? Then what do I, how do I want to teach and what's the skill level? And then, collecting your data, analyzing your data, and start to look at, as I said it previously, and Beth said it throughout this whole thing, is what fadings do we need in reinforcements to continuously teach this skill. So just I know it was a lot for all of you, including Beth and I.
So, us too.
Right. We can go on and on. I'm sure at one point we're like, all right, move it along. You said it like 3 different times. So thank you very much. And again, if you have any questions, reach out to Beth or myself or Cheryl or your family service coordinator. Oh, one last thing, as the staff who are watching this, not you as parents, but staff is watching it, same thing exists. Reach out to your psychologist. Keep it cool, guys. And what did you guys learn from this? What did you take away from it? So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Another one will be coming. Bye.
Bye.